In this tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to do the Doctor Strange portal effect, so if this is something you're interested in, keep watching. Okay, so we're in Blender, and there are two tasks we need to do. One, we need to make a geometry node setup that has this spiral opening circle thing, and second of all, we're going to use that to generate particles, and that's pretty much the essence of it. So, starting off with the geometry nodes thing. Go to geometry nodes. The cube needs to be geonodes, and really what we want to do is kind of have a spiral that we can control and open and close. And it just so happens there's a spiral node exactly for this, and we're going to be doing some keyframes on this, okay? So spiral node, we want to make sure that is facing us. So I'm transforming it by 90 degrees on the, well, I guess it doesn't really matter if it's X or Y, but I'm going to do X just for convention. We want to compress this in space so it doesn't really look like a spring. You know what I mean? Not like that. So I'm going to set the height to 0, and boom, we have our spiral. Now, I would just turn this into a circle immediately, but the Doctor Strange thing has this kind of effect where it starts trickling in, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it forms a circle. And I wanted to kind of mimic that, okay? So let's set the start radius to 0, so it's pinched right here, so the spiral starts in, radius 0. And we are going to have this rotate on the y-axis. You could either do this with nodes or with drivers. I'm going to do it with a driver. So hash frame, let's see how fast that is. That seems to be a bit too fast, divided by 2. So this is going to give us the frame number divided by 2, which is equivalent, by the way, to using the time node with frame, and then you take it and then you divide it by 2, right? Okay, we have this spinning thing. Let's make it grow and expand in all this. To do this, I'm going to use a trim curve node. This is going to let us trim the curve even as it's spinning. So what I'm thinking is, if we open up our keyframes, and again, I'm trying to add as many layers of detail as possible to make this thing look realistic. In the beginning, this should be set to 0. Keyframe, hover over it, hit I. We'll say over 20 frames, it's going to start opening up just a little bit. And this is the piece that's now going to rotate. So it opens up. It's going to hold that for a couple frames, keyframe, and then for the next 40 frames, it's going to open all the way up, just like that. Now, let's see what that looks like. And then it opens all the way up. Beautiful. Only other detail, of course, is when it opens all the way up, it should be a circle, not a spiral, right? And we can fix that. So on this frame, when we're doing the main transition, so between here and here, that interval, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keyframe the settings we need to change, like the start radius and the number of rotations. Because over here, we don't want 2 revolutions, we want just 1. And we want the start radius to be big enough so that it's matching right here, which happens to be 2. So let's see what this looks like. It opens up, it's spiraling, and then it expands to a full circle. And you can see during this transition, it still has some spirally elements, which I think looks pretty interesting. And again, what I want you to imagine is everything we're doing here is going to spawn some particles off of it. So let me actually just save this, call it Patreon, you know the gist. Another level of detail we can add, and there's actually a famous Houdini tutorial about this that kind of goes over the same thing. By the way, we can add some resolution here. What that Houdini tutorial basically says, it's the same effect, but they're like, add as many layers of detail as possible. So for example, once it's here and it's a circle, that's kind of boring, right? So let's add some distortion or something, just something to always keep it dynamic. So I'm going to do a set position just to add some distortion with some offset with a noise texture. If you're not familiar with geometry nodes, this is the time, my guys. So noise texture is going to distort our circle, but it's distorting it in a strange way, not the way, not the way that I am looking for. Because first of all, I only want the distortion to be on this axis and this one, not on the y-axis. So I'm going to multiply by 101 so that the y is suppressed. We don't have any of that. And second of all, I want this to be shifted over, which we can do actually before that. So I want this to be shifted over because you can see before the set position and after it's kind of going down to the bottom left. We can fix that by just subtracting the vector negative 0.5, or I guess adding it, so subtracting 0.5. There we go. So now we have this thing that is centered and distorted only on the X and Z axes. And now let's bring down our scale and basically play around with the detail and stuff of our noise until it looks kind of like low-res kind of waves. Finally, another thing we could do is we could add some scaling just so it's not as intense. So here we go. Before, after, just a tiny bit of distortion. Again, to animate this thing, we're always going to add in a W slider, which lets us add that wiggle in. And this time, just for using all the options, I'm going to use the seconds thing. So you can see now it's doing that thing. So we have this thing open up with a bit of distortion, and then it fully opens, and it's wobbling, and it will look a bit inconsistent, which is good. I'm going to have it hold for this many frames, and then finally we're going to have it close up. So we could do it in disorder where we pinch it and then give it geometry, or the other way around. I'm thinking let's give it geometry first. So I'm going to take this curve. Again, everything we've been doing is a manipulation to curves. We need to turn this into a mesh because it seems like particles doesn't work with curves, at least as is. So all I'm doing is I'm doing a basic conversion to turn this into like a donut. So you can see, whoa, it opens, and I mean, it looks horrible, but you see the point. It just turns it into a mesh. I'm going to bring down the radius quite a bit until it's a very thin line. And this is going to be the geometry we're spawning stuff off of. Okay. So we just swept it with a curved circle. And now the idea that I was talking about is getting this to pinch now that we have some geometry. Is, let's see, where's our keyframes? Here on this mesh. We'll have it go till frame 140, and then we're going to have this pinch. So I'm going to keyframe the scale, and then let's say over 20-some frames, it goes to 0. So let's see what that looks like. So it spirals, it opens, it has that distortion, lots of levels of detail, and pinch. And I think that pinching is taking too long. Let's make that shorter. Pinch. Beautiful. And then we don't need many frames after that. Okay, so we did kind of the hard part. The rest of this is actually smooth sailing. If you made it through this, now we get to do the fun part, which actually looks visually interesting. So now that we have geometry nodes, which again, think of this as a modifier, we're going to add particles, which you can also think of as a modifier. So geometry nodes, then particles. If we add particles, you're going to see there are particles streaming, but from the center of it, it seems to not even care that we, put in all this work, which is kind of insulting. We need it to care. To do this, go to source, go to use modifier stack, and now it's going to use the modifier stack. Geometry nodes is a modifier to say where should particles come from. And you can see it's respecting our thing. It looks horrible, but you can see it's doing it. Okay. Why does it look horrible? Because particles are dropping off of the mesh, but just kind of, and by the way, once we get to the pinching part, we don't need any more particles. So let's say this can turn off at frame 153. It looks horrible because they're just spawning off the mesh with gravity and there's no like momentum to them, right? So let's fix that. Go to velocity, go to tangent, bring it up. And let's see what that looks like. Now you can see it's really shooting off in kind of this circular motion, which looks pretty good. So I'm just going to bump that up even more. Now, technically, if you wanted this to be 100% accurate, you wouldn't want this to be a circle that we swept here in the geometry nodes. Because now the tangent could go either one way or the other. It's up to you. You could try, I don't know if this would work, but you could try sweeping a line. I'm just going to try it just to make sure. Well, that definitely gives something. We want to rotate it so it's facing the X. Yeah, X direction. But you could see this kind of generates its own set of issues. So it's up to you what you want to do with this. I'm just going to keep it at a circle since this is what I did for the original. But there are ways to solve this. Not that I know what they are. Okay, so now you can see the particles are kind of doing the right thing. But let's add some more detail. So I'm going to add a plane. So let's say this portal opens all the way up. I want it to be kind of above this ground plane. I want this ground plane to be a collision thing. Particles can bounce off of it. So with this plane selected, I'm going to go to the physics tab, make it a collision, and now you can see particles are bouncing off of it. Beautiful. Let's give it even more detail. Particles should be dampened with some randomness. Let's have it be a bit sticky. Friction with randomization. Basically, all this is saying some of the particles are going to stick onto here. Some of them are going to bounce. It depends. Let's turn dampening down. So they don't all look exactly the same. Another thing we need to do is the particles kind of live forever. So now I'm just kind of going through particle settings, as you can see, but we'll make it look good. Do not worry. The particles are living forever. Let's have them live for 10 frames, enough for like a collision and not much else. So let's see. Yeah, that looks good. Maybe 15 frames. Let's up the number of particles to make it look a lot denser. There we go. Now we're starting to get something. And we could play around with the velocity. You can try some other stuff like object velocity. Let's see what that gives us. Gives us something. Let's see if that looks better than the tangent. That kind of seems the way to go, actually. That way it's actually kind of respecting the direction of it. So I'm going to use object velocity instead. Add a bit of randomization just so it looks, more dynamic. And I feel like an issue is that it's shooting a bit too fast. Particles are living a bit too long. It's always this process of going back and forth. But once we get it, we get it. Okay, that looks a lot better. Nice. And now, okay. Once you're happy with your simulation, and I think I am, now let's actually make it like renderable and make it look good and stuff like that. So let's add lifetime randomness, and instead of these spheres, let's add little particles, little cubes. So I'm going to put a cube way off to the side. We can call it particle. And the idea is for each of these points that are being generated, we are going to instance one of these cubes. So and the point of this is we can apply a special material to that cube. So for render, go to object, what object, the particle. So now you can see we have a bunch of cubes, and we want those to be a lot tinier, randomized in scale. So now you can see we get even another source of variation. This is starting to look a lot better. And by the way, at the end, we're going to up this particle number a lot. And you can see how that's going to make it look super good. But okay, so we have this. Let's give this thing a material. So I'm going to operate in cycles for this because we're going to want the particle info node, which is only in cycles. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the only thing I might want to correct is I want this to be right touching this. Okay. To give this thing a material, finally, I'm going to assign a material to our particle. You're going to notice because this is what is instanced, I actually gave it geometry nodes, not a particle. Go to shading, go to render view, cube, material, glow. You're going to notice because this cube is being instanced, whatever I do here is going to happen to every single one of our particles is the idea, right? So what I'm going to do is give this a custom material that should look good for this. So by the way, we don't need the light object. For our particle, we're going to use an emission, so it's glowing, and you can see that's already casting light on our environment. We want this to be kind of a yellowish orange, not fully orange. You want it to be kind of low saturation, kind of. And the rest of the detail we're actually going to get from the particle info node, because you can see since we're using particles, I have information like random. Each particle can have a number between 0 and 1. We have the age, the lifetime, a bunch of stuff. So one thing I want to do is with the random, instead of having one color, let's have two colors of particles. So we could have this orange, so I'm just control-C'ing, VV, and have some of these be kind of more red. So you can see we have two options here. Random is selecting between them. So that's going to add a bit of variation. Another thing is the strength. This should be huge. 50? No. 25, something like that. It's hard to tell because the number of particles is going to affect this, right? If I go back to our particle simulation, and let's up it by 3, and let's also bake it so that we don't need to calculate it each time. So this time I'm calculating my particle motion so that it's going to be baked in. It's not going to change. This will tell us how bright it needs to be, because if there's more particles, it's going to emit more light. But also, if we make the particles tinier, it's going to be less of a deal. Okay, so I think this is roughly the correct level of emission I'd want. Let's add in more detail for our material. What else do we have? We have the age of the particle and the lifetime. What does that mean? That means if we take age, and think about it like this, if you take age and you divide it by lifetime, that's going to give us a 0 to 1 map of how long the particle has been alive. So the particles very close to the ring are going to be black because they've just been born. Age 0 divided by like lifetime equal to 15. And then they're going to get whiter and whiter and whiter And we can use this mask to basically say, control the strength of the emission. Or something similar to that. I think that's what we'll do. So we're going to control the strength of the emission. I'm going to send this through a color ramp because right now it's inverted. So I want the particles to start off very bright and then to become not very dim, but like dimmer. And then for this, we can just multiply it because originally it was at 25. We take it, we multiply it by 25. So it's going to go from 25 to like, I don't know, 30% of 25. So you can see here's the before. You can see these particles on the outskirts are super bright, and then after, they get dimmer, and it looks much more realistic in my mind. Okay, so we have the basic material. There's more information you can have, like velocity and angular velocity. I guess velocity would be the one that's useful here to extract information from. I'm not going to do that. I'm happy with this. So now let's get closer to final render kind of settings. So now that we're here, we want to make sure that we don't see this ring as actual geometry in our render. So in the render, disable show emitter. And then for the viewport, just so we can see what it would look like, we can also disable show emitter. So now we have only particles. We're going to delete the bake, and I'm going to up the number one more time. So instead of 3, we're going to use 10. So this is, I think we're now at the point where it's too fast to calculate on the fly. Yeah, that's a lot of particles. So we're going to bake one more time. And if my voice gets glitchy during this recording, it's because my graphics card is doing a lot at once. We're going to bake it, and then I will show you how to render a frame, which you can render all the frames like this to get it to look super, super good. Because there's one more trick that is pivotal to making the Doctor Strange portal effect. Okay, so let's see. It's calculating. Okay, so we have particles. It's going to play slowly. Just get used to that. So it's spinning, spinning, and then it's going to start growing into our large circle. There we go. Okay, so this is kind of like a good approximation of what our frames would look like. And you can see we're starting to get the look. Here's the secret to making it look like a Doctor Strange portal. Because if you think about it, it's not like these dots coming out of it. There's streaks shooting out of it, right? And we haven't captured that. And I'll show you how to capture that. So in the camera view, I'm just going to position this to be like, a nicely composed frame. In fact, what I can do, since we've already baked everything, and this is our collision plane, I'm just going to take this, bring it up so we have kind of like a lighting setup. Just like a basic studio lighting setup. And let me show you the secret. So right now, if we were to render this at like a low sample count, maybe some denoising, this is what it would look like. So let's see. You'd actually be surprised. It's not going to take that long to render. Okay, so it looks fine, but it just kind of looks like a bunch of particles, like just a Blender simulation. The secret is, and this is the most important thing to take away from this tutorial, other than the geometry node setup, enable motion blur, okay? Because each of these particles has a streak. It's been shot out from our emitter. So when we enable motion blur, let's see what happens. Well, it's going to take a second, but you could see like the whole look of it as it's, there we go. The whole look of it completely changes. Again, it's the same simulation, but now each of these particles has this nice kind of streak going with it. And you can actually control how long that streak is by changing the motion blur. The closer this is to 0, the less motion blur there will be. The closer this is to 1, the more there will be. So if I now go to our rendered frame, which looks pretty good, to be honest, and you've probably seen this thing in action in the beginning of the video. You take this, you could add some post-processing, like some glare, to make it like even crazier. I would recommend not going overboard with this. So before, after, and you could even consider adding some weird filters to this, like this, to kind of highlight it. And the way you do that is you'd mix this on top of the original image, you'd set it to add. So before, after, just to make the particles pop a bit more. But that's kind of the essence of it. Of course, you'd want to put something behind here because it's a portal. But that's it. That's my Doctor Strange effect. I've seen other people do this in Blender. I don't think anybody's made it look as good. So I'm happy with that. How long have we been going? 20 minutes. You should have told me. Okay, either way, this is the end of the tutorial. I taught you how to make a Doctor Strange portal, and because I've spent so much time, let me just spend a moment at the very end of this to tell you about Patreon. So, if you want to get the blend file for this, you don't want to make it yourself. I mean, you need to recache it, but if you want the blend file for this, if you want to watch tutorials early, if you want exclusive tutorials, there's a link in the description of where you can do that. There are some 720 people who are paying money to do this. So it is worth it in a lot of people's eyes. The things you get, I've already mentioned, you get the blend files, and that's since 2019. A lot of project files you can download all at once. I've made a lot of them available. Exclusive tutorials, early access, get all of those. But more importantly, if you want to support this channel and CG Matter keep tutorials for free for everybody, that is the reason it's being done, those 720 people. So if you want to contribute, be part of that, there's a link in the description. But either way, thank you for your 20 minutes of retention. I know it was a lot: geometry nodes, particles, shading, proceduralism. But this is what I call a good tutorial. I'm happy with it, and I'll see you next time.